Hey, welcome to Shop Talk with Cassandra Renee. With me is my co-host, Kevin Eaton.
Good morning, Baltimore.
Hey,
Yay, yay.
did you have a great weekend?
Indeed, I did. I really did. My son was involved in a karate tournament there. Yeah, and he come home with a second place trophy taller than him. So, yeah, it was a good weekend.
Congratulations, KJ.
Yep, to the Faith Fighters Martial Arts Academy.
Shout out to them.
Yeah, they did a good job.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I did my usual.
Okay.
I pretty much worked all weekend.
Well, yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Did I call you? Did we talk this weekend?
No, we did not
Before the
talk this
weekend. You were working in too, I think.
Yes, I
on
just
your
work.
way to Yeah.
Night and day.
That's my cuz.
Hey. On the line, we have Jimmy. Hi, Jimmy. Good. Did you have a great weekend? Good.
It was good. The Ravens won. I know you had a good weekend. Huh?
That was a nail biter. I had to walk away. Well, it does kind of go over to the win column. It doesn't matter how we do it as long as we do it.
Wow.
Did you see the little dance that, what's his name, Tucker, the kicker? You see the little dance that he did? Well, I just caught the replay of it. They did it in slow motion, so I just thought maybe it was just because it was in slow motion it looked awkward. But that wasn't the case, huh? I tell you, we are so excited and thrilled to have Mr. Earl Smith in the studio with us. Hi,
Indeed.
Earl.
Good morning. Good morning. How's everyone?
All right.
Good.
Welcome.
Just to remind you, last week Jimmy led the conversation about workplace bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Jimmy? Because you brought up the case of the NFL player, right? Yes. Oh my goodness. Whew, that's something to think about. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to bring Mr. Earl Smith into the studio with us today, because we're going to talk about bullying, and we're also going to talk about how you can protect yourself, when it's time for evaluations or the potential of termination. And also to the employers, maybe give them some tips on how to deal with certain situations. So this is going to be a great show. So, you may want to contribute to it. If you'd like to call in, the number is 410-481-1010 or 1-877-704-1010. Mr. Earl Smith, tell us about you.
Okay. Just spent 38 years in corporate America. Every moment just absolutely exciting. Ups and downs, typical. But most of my experience and time with corporate America was spent in various leadership and management roles. And as I went through those different periods, I began to discover that in many cases people were being abused and discounted and minimized simply because they either didn't have information as to their own rights, or they weren't aware of corporate policies, or they weren't aware of federal regulations and laws that would have protected them. So in many cases, as I was involved in various levels of investigations associated with the workplace and discrepancies associated with appraisals and performance reviews and disputes between the company and employees, I took a special interest in making sure that I understood how to ensure that people were being treated fairly, not only as a manager but as an employee and as an investigator. So most of my time was spent with IBM and Lockheed Martin, two major corporations, obviously large corporations, and it was an excellent training ground. So as I've gone through this life, and I hear from people who are experiencing very, very negative situations in the workplace, I'm always ready to provide insight and try to help if I can at this
Yes.
point.
Sure.
And he does make an extremely important and valid point, and you got to understand how difficult it is for particularly our kids today, and some of it we have to take responsibility for. When you're bringing these kids along and all they're hearing are the quote positive things, You're going to be, if you go out, you get your education, get all the degrees and all the credentials, and believe me, when you step out into corporate America, everyone's going to treat you fairly and everything's going to be fine. That is not true. And so in many, many cases, our kids are totally unprepared for what it is they're about to step into. Now, I know when I was raised up, my father and mother told me right away, when you go out there, you're gonna have all those credentials, but you're gonna have to work twice as hard, and you're still gonna have to fight every day. My children today, and I think of my daughter specifically, 44, she was a director at GE for quality engineering, and I can't tell you the number of times she would call and say, Dad, I can't believe that these people are trying to pull this. And here I am, I've been with them all these years, and I still have to fight almost every day for the right things when I go in there. So I agree with the caller 100%, but one of the first things as part of an investigation, I would say to anyone who had a dispute, are you really willing to fight for what you believe is right? Because if I'm going to invest the energy in trying to help you protect yourself, you can't, in the middle of this, decide to throw your hands up and walk away. You have got to fight. And when we preach to these kids about a career, and we put that into their heads, and they buy into it, and then they want to try to save it and not sacrifice it, part of that is our problem as parents. We got to make sure they understand you can't give up your self-integrity because of this thing called career.
Yeah.
And you are going to have to fight, and if you're not willing to fight, then you're going to be at the whim of anybody who happens to be your supervisor or coworker.
Now, let's step back for a second, though. But what is your definition of bullying in the workplace?
I'll tell you right away, and I mean, I'm very sensitive to titles and putting names on things. We're supposed to have a harassment-free workplace.
Yes.
So I want to stay with that term. Bullying, physical, verbal abuse, pranks, ethnic jokes, that is all harassment. And harassment is the nomenclature that best covers those things that are not proper in the workplace.
Okay, well, Mr. Earl Smith, let me jump in here for a second and ask you this question. As an investigator, you're an investigator, correct? As an investigator, when you get, I guess we would say a case where an employee will come in and say, okay, I have a situation on my job. As an investigator, how long does your investigation take, and what exactly does an investigation entail?
That's an excellent question, and there is no time limit set to conclude an investigation, because some investigations are very, very straightforward. Other issues are extremely complex. So if you take something that's as simple as what we call a violation of conditions of employment.
Okay.
Conditions of employment are different than performance-related issues. So conditions of employment become almost black and white. Conditions of employment, I got to be to work on time, right? No stealing, thievery, no fraud. You know, those physical assault is a condition of employment. It's not anything other than that. If you go in and you physically assault an employee under the conditions of employment, immediate action should be taken against the employee who initiated the assault. And in most cases, that would mean termination of the employee, particularly if there's a physical assault. Okay? So you have to remember, how that whole process is to work under the terms of conditions of employment.
Okay.
Okay. Do you think that bullying in the workplace, do you think that's on the rise, or do you think we're just talking about it more?
No, I'll be, and again, this is just my opinion as I've watched what's occurred over the last 15, 20 years. I think that there are some people who feel more emboldened today to harass and abuse people. They think that they have a little more latitude, and I think there are very, very valid reasons for that. I think, again, when we talk about making sure you understand the policies and the guidelines that have been set up within the corporations to protect you from these types of actions, very, very few people, when they go into a corporation or into that culture, sit down and take the time to understand what policies are there to protect me. So they don't know. Earlier we were having a discussion. So in many cases they'll turn to the immediate supervisor or the manager. What I found is in many cases today, because there's no real requirement for most of them, they don't even know what's supposed to happen. All right. So one of the first things I've said to new employees when I was working is when you come into this culture, one of the first things that I would request that you do to protect yourself is go to the corporate policies. In many cases they're posted electronically, and start to at least understand the areas of corporate policy that potentially you may want to understand if and when you need them. You know, we all have a little downtown time. If you're having lunch, go out to the corporate policies, take a look, find out what is available to you to protect yourself. Also, understand the responsibilities of your immediate managers and supervisors. Also, understand the role of HR, because they are absolutely there for you, but you have to know when to invoke them, right? I mean, there are people who will call HR for anything. You know, over time, anyone would find that bothersome. You have to be smart about how you utilize these tools that are available to you. But first, you have to be aware.
Right. Absolutely. Very good point. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, again, the number is 410-481-1010 or 1-877-704-1010. Just stepping back a little bit, though, what should a potential employee look for prior to employment with a corporation? Because I know, like, even with some job postings, you can look at them and you see certain keywords that kind of, key buzzwords that kind of may make you a little uncomfortable. You know, so prior to the employment, what should we be looking for?
When you say uncomfortable, you mean, are there red flags?
Red flags.
Red flag, the red
Yes.
flag. And it's really difficult if you are looking at an employment posting, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay? But, and again, most major corporations have huge websites. If you go to those websites, there are examples of employee relations and all types of postings that give you some sense of how much thought has been put into the treatment of their employees, how much consideration is given to the treatment of the employees. And normally you'll see postings on things like affinity groups. Affinity groups are those organizations within the corporation that are sanctioned and supported by that corporation. And in many cases, you'll see one for African Americans. I'm not with that term. I'm mostly black, but African American, Asian. And if you see those types of things, then it gives you a sense that that corporation is interested in the people that it employs. When you go out and you look at some of their other corporate policies, you might find more information on how they protect themselves and what they expect under performance guidelines and conditions of employment and those types of terms that, again, go to how am I treating people. You can also, on some of those websites, find out how many types of complaints, how many different types of complaints have been posted against that particular, or how many relational activities or events are they handling to make sure that the employees are being heard and understood.
So in other words, you're saying do your due diligence.
You have to. I mean, just like they're interviewing you.
Yes.
If you think that they're a prospective employer, you better take some time to interview them. And when you're in that interview, ask those questions.
Yes.
How many times have you personally been involved in a dispute? Now, they may not be forthcoming, but if they're not forthcoming, or if they say never, that should be a red flag.
Red flag.
Right. Be smart.
You know, I have a question for you, Earl.
Yes.
How should an employee prepare him or herself if he or she believes that management is trying to frustrate him or her into resigning?
And there's a lot of that goes on. It's
Absolutely.
You know, it's interesting, right? They talk about the law, and they say if you have very, very deep pockets, you can win almost any case in our judicial system, right? And they say the insurance companies, because they know they have deep pockets, they'll just wait you out. You know, we'll take you through trial after trial after trial, knowing your funds and resources are finite.
Yes.
Well, it's similar when you talk about individuals in the workplace. I mean, as an employee, I've got so many. I mean, you have so many things that you have to worry about, right? I've got, in most cases, families that I have to worry about. You could have health issues if you have parents who are elder. You've got a lot that you should be focused on. The last thing that you want to have to do is to go to work and fight with someone who is fundamentally trying to damage you in some way, shape, or form. All right. And so in most cases, the first step, like we said earlier today, is you have to decide to fight. Once you decide to fight, in my opinion, there is no quit until the fight is done. And in many cases, it's not about winning or losing. And I can tell you there's a culture in corporate America and here in the States. If you fight, in many cases, even if you lose, the next time, they tend to not bother you a whole lot. And when people talk about bullying, you remember years ago our parents used to tell us, well, at least if you stand up and fight,
Yes.
they'll probably leave you alone next time.
Yes.
But if you don't fight, then you're going to be picked on and picked on and picked on. A lot of this is the same thing in corporate America. You have to at least take the steps to stand up and fight.
Okay, what about
Now,
documentation?
I'm going to get there.
Okay.
Now, but the first step is you got to fight. Once you decide that yes, you're going to take this on, you have to make sure that you have documentation. One of the first things I would ask for as an investigator is I want to see the documentation. Where did you say? So if the manager said this, where did you write down, no, I disagree, that's not what happened. Where's your version? And it better be documented, not verbal. And if we went into an investigation and there was no documentation from the employee that supported their side of it, the investigation was just about done. You need that documentation to fight with. And don't hesitate. Write it down.
Jimmy, do you have any
If you
questions?
decide to fight, you fight until it's done.
Yes. And what should an employee do if he feels that he's being discriminated against?
Well, it really is the same. You got to, when you say discrimination, I mean, all of this is really discrimination. I don't care whether, when you talk about discrimination, you're talking about, okay, what's the reason behind me being treated poorly?
Yes.
And in many cases, you may not know the exact reason. The point is the action that's being taken against you. And that's what you have to focus on. I mean, discrimination, like we said, can go, a person may have a problem with you because your age, your age, your ethnicity, your
Sexual preference?
Any of that.
Yes.
But the point is focus on the situation and the actions that are being taken against you that are illegal actions. We'll figure out the reasons as we go through the investigation.
Because you mentioned something about HR being a recourse. When is it appropriate to seek legal counsel?
Well, are you talking HR or legal counsel?
Legal counsel
outside of.
Outside the corporation.
Theoretically, if you go through the process as it's described, let's say in your corporate policies, which basically says if you're being, let's say, bullied or harassed in the workplace and you've gone to your immediate supervisor or manager, no action has been taken, you escalate that through your chain of command, if you will, and no action has been taken. You've gone to HR and no action has been taken. Absolutely, at that point in time, you step outside of the corporation or the business or that entity, right? When you do step outside, we still have the EEO commissions. The EEO commissions are state and federal. You want to be sure that you understand how they're structured. But when you go to EEO, you got to understand that EEO is the law. So that's not a casual thing. But once you involve them, they have laws under which they will operate, and they will advise you immediately if they think that you have a legitimate case. One of the things they're going to ask for is documentation. So be prepared for that. Now, when you talk about bullying, understand EEO will help me as part of the resolution process. But if you are being physically assaulted and abused, you can step to the local police system and get them to put this to a stop. People hesitate to go to the police and talk to them about physical assault. Physical assault in the workplace is the same as physical assault if you're walking down the street or if you're on a bus. It's all physical assault. Doesn't preclude you going to EEO to get your situation resolved in that the company didn't react to your situation.
Right.
But what you need is an immediate resolution to the physical assault piece of it. So understand that your local police organizations are there to help you also.
Kevin?
Well, so what is somebody going to a situation right now? Who would they contact? Like, do you have a number or something that people can contact to, get the ball rolling?
When you say through a situation, I'm going to try to define it just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, here you go. If you are being physically assaulted and harassed and intimidated to the point where you really have nowhere else to turn, all of the local police agencies are available. And I don't have the numbers, but they're online, easily available to us. Please do me a favor. Do not use 911.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. Okay, so I'm not being physically abused, but
I'm getting there.
okay.
Now, when it comes to the EEO Commission, again, go online. It's
Okay.
easy. You have EEO state and EEO federal. Normally you'll start at the state level. There's so much information on that website. You may want to go immediately to the advisors, and they have a section for those folks, and start talking with them and start working with them. They will help you open a case, okay, and get it started for you.
Okay.
But that's how you want to approach this if you want to take it outside. And some people, even if they have a case inside the company and the corporation, they still go to EEO.
Mhm.
This is not to be confused with affirmative action, folks. Don't get those two confused.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yeah, but what if it isn't blatant though? You know, what if it's the actual psychological warfare and we only have like 1 minute left? What should you do?
You still need evidence and documentation.
Mhm.
Even if you have a thought in your mind that you're being treated unfairly, start documenting it and raising a protest.
Okay, thank you so much, Earl Smith, for coming in to join us. I tell you, it's just such a broad subject.
It is.
So we're going to have to bring you back. But
That's
thank
fine.
you so much for coming. Jimmy, thanks so much for calling in. And to our audience, thanks so much for tuning in. And until next Monday at 11 o'clock, bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Take care.